On this episode of Locked On Angels, the Halos did something last night that they haven't done, John, since April 10th, and it helped them get a win against the Blue Jays. Plus, they snapped a 7-game losing streak against those same Blue Jays. We're going to talk about it. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shows are much more fun when there's a win. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come over to YouTube, leave a comment. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Who's this team, and what do they do with the stinky Angels from the last couple of weeks? Hey,
doesn't matter. Leave them there.
Leave them behind. You left them on the plane in
Yes.
wherever they were coming from, right?
You're not welcome here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's our fourth season as a host of Locked On Angels, talking Angels baseball with you every Monday through Friday, every single weekday. On today's show, who is more of an influence on the Halo hitters, the coaches or the players? And what did Wash say will help the Angels not to strike out so much? But first, Mike, let's recap that big win the Angels had against the Blue Jays last night. Fantastic win. And they looked like the team from the first 2 weeks of the season, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They looked really good. So a couple things happened before this game, Johnny. They selected the contracts of Connor Brogdon, who was really struggling in AAA, so he just might be a warm body that they need. But Hector Neris also was brought up, and he entered in this game last night in the eighth inning.
He got the win!
And he got the win. Yeah, it was great. They also reinstated Yohan Moncada from the IL, which ended up being a great thing. We'll talk about him in just a second. Nico Cavadas went back to AAA, and then they designated Touki Toussaint for assignment, and then Michael Darrell Hicks was also optioned back to AAA as well.
And
yeah,
read the last one.
I was gonna save this one for you because he's one of your favorites, isn't he?
Hunter Strickland signs a minor league deal with the Angels, and so he's back in the organization. Mike, it's something I thought that they should do before the season even started, right? He had a chance with the Rangers in spring training. They didn't end up taking him, so he has been a free agent all this time. 3.31 ERA with the Angels last year, and I like him as a warm body more than I like some of the other names that they've been bringing up for the bullpen. Absolutely.
And I think, John, experience is what they're going for in that bullpen right now, because it seems like they have a lot of young guys. It doesn't seem. They do have a lot of young guys, and I think that that's one of the reasons why they've struggled. We'll get to that in just a moment. John, no Joe Adell in the starting lineup, but he did enter later and hit a home run. Wash spoke about Joe before the game. He said he's taking too many pitches down the middle of the plate, which means that he's guessing, and so he wants him to be a bit more confident. Campero was in right field, but then he left because on a swing, he got some ankle irritation was the diagnosis,
right.
But it looked like he really bent that ankle in a really awkward way.
Mike, that looked like an Achilles thing to me. The way it went forward, that just, I think he stretched it, man. That's just no good. And so our thoughts go now to Gustavo Campero. Kyron Paris was in center for this one. Moncada's back at third base, batting sixth. That moves Rengifo over to second base. Mike, Moncada has been such an underrated part of this team. He's so smooth with it over at third base, much more confident and consistent on defense than I have been in Rengifo. And so it was just so great to see him back in this lineup.
Yeah, Johnny, he also, hit a big home run, and we'll get to that detail in just a minute. But I think, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I know it's fresh. It's new.
Are we starting a narrative here on Locked On Angels?
I think that he might. I'm putting quotations up for those on the audio side. He might be the key or the catalyst to this lineup being consistent at the plate. And here's why. He draws walks. Remember, start of the year, wasn't hitting the ball.
Right.
He was drawing walks and making contact and having productive outs.
Right.
He does make contact and moves runners over and isn't a guy that strikes out a lot, at least so far this season. John, I really like that he takes a lot of pitches. He looks at a lot of pitches at the plate.
Yep.
And so what are your thoughts on him? Maybe don't jump all over me, everydayers. Maybe could be like the catalyst to this team going, okay, we felt like the lineup stretched a little bit. Look, he's taken a lot of pitches. We've seen a lot of things. What do you think of my thought there?
I'm just glad he's back, Mike. And for all of the reasons that you stated, he's going to see a lot of pitches. He's going to take his walks, and he's going to get a hit like he did last night every now and then. You're not going to expect a home run out of Moncada every time.
Yeah.
But what you can expect out of him is either taking a walk, fouling off stuff, or making contact and having productive outs, right? Even if that ball hadn't gone out, like you could have had, move the runners over on it and done something with that because it went out to that right field corner, and the runners could have moved up on that, but he hit it out. And so that's just that's a bonus on top of what it could have been, which is just moving the runners over on like on a fly out. But all that to say, to have somebody as consistent as him when he's healthy, that's the key. He's got to be healthy. And I know they've been keeping him out because he couldn't swing it from the right side or whatever. But the fact is that him being back in this lineup, like you said, extends things. And you know what? Let's start a dialogue. Let's start Moncada is the key to this team actually playing well.
I'm gonna keep track of that. I'm gonna need you to buckle up, nerds, and get some stats for me to back it up.
But here's the other thing, though. Everybody took really good at bats.
They did. Yep.
I was impressed with Taylor Ward. He hit that 2-run home run. But Mike, I tweeted it in the first inning. I said, "Are the Angels protecting plate?" Because the bozo umpire was calling that strike away on all the right-handed hitters, and so I watched them protect the plate. They said, all right, if that's what he's going to do, then I'm going to swing it and foul it off. And that's what Taylor Ward did. He was able to answer George Springer's first home run in the first inning. And Taylor Ward had a 2-run home run of his own, and Zach Neto was on base for him. So fantastic from Taylor Ward doing what he did. And we got word before the game, Jeff Fletcher reported on this in an article. He had at-bats against a minor league pitcher earlier in the day at Angel Stadium to try to get going. He said he saw about 35 to 40 pitches, and he said he's going to go through a similar routine today. Wash added, if you ask me, we should have had the whole team out there.
Does Wash know that he's the manager,
right.
that he can
Wash,
have the whole team up there?
Do that if you'd like to.
Hey, Wash, you can do that.
Yeah, congratulations. This isn't the days of Joe Madden of, you know what, we don't need any BP today.
Right.
We don't need any cages today. Yeah, nothing like that.
Right. Now, they did look good last night offensively. They did struggle from the first inning on, but then they put together that huge inning. But, John, game was close because Tyler Anderson pitched really well. He had a season-high 7 strikeouts, 6 2/3, 6 innings, 2 runs, 1 walk, just an intentional walk to Vlad Jr. through 93 pitches, 4th straight quality start. Over his last 5 starts, Johnny, he has a 2.08 ERA in 30 1/3 innings pitched, just 7 earned runs. Why did he do so well in this game? Give me one reason.
Pitching smart, Mike. He's seeing what the guys are doing up at the plate and going, all right, I got you now. I can throw my change up out and away, and you're going to chase it, right? And so that's how he generated so many strikeouts. And there was a couple times where I think, because I felt surprised. He threw the fastball, his 89-mile-an-hour fastball, and it was right there, not in the heart of the plate, but like in the zone.
Yeah.
And I think he just fooled a couple of guys into thinking he was going to throw something else, and then it was kind of a surprise fastball. They were sitting on something else. So we talked about Joe Adell and what Wash had to say about guessing up there, but Tyler Anderson is ahead of the curve, and he's ahead of the hitters, and he's inside their head. Yeah. And he's thinking, you know what? I bet you he thinks I'm going to throw a changeup here. Let's throw in 89 and see what he does with it. If he fouls it off, then good. That's another strike. But to get strikeouts and do what he was doing, man, I think he's just pitching really smart up there.
Yeah. Now, Ryan Johnson came in, relieved him. He struck out the last batter of that inning when Tyler Anderson left, then came back out again and gave up a home run to Anthony Santander, who hit the ball off of his shoestrings, off of his shoe tops, right? He crushed it. It was the stat is rough. It was the 8th straight game that the Halos bullpen has given up a run in the 7th inning or later, and the 5th straight game where they've allowed a run in the 8th inning or later. And I think this is why, John, Hector Neris is on this team, and why eventually we're going to see Hunter Strickland, because without Ben Joyce, there's been this gap of A and B bullpen, right?
Right.
And they've struggled to fill that with somebody that can actually get outs. And I think what they're going after right now are experienced bullpen guys. Hector Neris, 35 years old, was a closer 2 years ago, had a 1-something ERA. And so I think that they're really trying to lean in that direction so that they don't find themselves in situations like they were for a bit of time last night when they were tied and then they gave up the tie and we're down by 1, 3-2.
Yeah. And look, this is what happens when you put the ball in play, which is something the Angels haven't been doing because they've been swinging for the fences for the last 3 weeks. Neris kept it to a 1-run deficit, struck out the 2 batters he faced, bottom of the 8th. Neto walks and steals his second stolen base of the night.
Yep.
Shawnuel bunts, and, it kind of ricocheted back to Alejandro Kirk, and he's the Jays catcher. He threw the ball to third, but the third baseman couldn't handle it for some reason. It hit the heel of his glove, and so it rolled past him into left field. So Neto scores, and then Shawnuel ends up at second. That ties the game. It's stuff like that the Angels haven't been doing for a while. A lot of heads-up plays and a lot of heads-up running out there. Now, Jorge Soler followed up by striking out looking.
Yeah.
You got to swing the bat, bro. You can't.
It was a strike. It was right down the middle, man. Like you gotta make some contact there,
what
bro.
You're looking at, yeah. 1 out. Taylor Ward just puts the ball in play. Infield single. Shawnuel goes to third. O'Hoppe singles to left. Shawnuel scores, and so that was Logan's third hit, and it was on an 0-2 pitch.
Yeah,
and I like that he took it the way that he did down that left field line, and then Moncada gets up there and just hits a random 3-run homer to really put this one out of reach, 7-3. And then with 2 outs, Joe Adell hits a home run to dead center field. So it was a 6-run inning for the Angels. And somebody said, a friend of ours said, Joe, you got to do that sooner in the game, bro. But I'm like, you know what? I'll take garbage time home runs because the Angels need all the help that they can get. And then Jose Fermin comes in to finish the game and is able to get the Angels to win 8-3. First time scoring more than 5 runs in a game since April 10th, Mike. So that's something they haven't done since April 10th. So an 8-3 victory over the Blue Jays. They're 14-20 on the season with 2 more against the Blue Jays in this homestand. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up, what did Wash say the Halo hitters need to do in order to not strike out so much? Well, he didn't say fire Johnny Washington, but we will tell you what he did say, and we'll get into that conversation coming right up.
Nothing like watching baseball with your favorite snack, wonderful pistachios. They're the highest protein nut, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value, and they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you going all day long. John, from innings 2 to about innings number 7, I was fiddling with the in-shell variety because I needed something to do.
As you should.
I was nervous, but then once they added on some runs, I felt the relief go out of my body, and I was able to go and get the non-shelled ones and just pop them in my mouth. It was great. Get snacking, get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now, there was an article that came out from Jeff Fletcher of the OC Register, and it got a lot of Angel fans talking, including us, Mike. And so we wanted to address that conversation on today's show. Who's to blame for the hitting woes? Well, Perry Manassian said it's more on the players than the coaches, specifically on the veterans. Perry said when it's your veteran players who have been in the league for a long time, they have basically established themselves in a certain way. A lot of veteran players are their own hitting coaches. And in regards to the younger players, Perry said, if we had a group of guys that were young and they were all struggling, that's totally different. The young guys have actually played better than our veteran players to a certain extent, statistically. Now, he's correct in the sense that the vets, like Trout and Ward and Rengifo, have struggled more than the young guys, Neto, O'Hoppe, and Shawnuel. In fact, Trout, Ward, and Rengifo are 200 points below their career average OPS so far this season. Neto and O'Hoppe are close to a 900 OPS, while Shawnuel is around the 700 mark on his OPS. O'Hoppe did say that the players are the ones that should take the blame. He said, I think that's part of the frustration of it. The blame is getting put on the wrong people. O'Hoppe also said it's not just the vets, but everybody. So if it's a matter of being your own hitting coach, so to speak, what should they do to coach themselves to get out of this slump, Mike?
Whatever they did last night, right?
Yeah.
Whatever
Watch the
they
tape,
did last
rewind.
night, because they fought off pitches. They were looking at good pitches. They drew a few walks. I know that there were some calls that were a bit off the plate, which are frustrating, but they also moved runners over, made contact. They didn't waste outs. They did what they were supposed to do last night. And so if these veterans and maybe some of these young guys are their own hitting coach, well, then maybe they need to just watch the tape on what they did last night, because what they did last night was the same team that we saw in the first 2 weeks of the season.
You know what drives me nuts is the quote from Travis d'Arnaud that you shared the other day, talking about, I was worried about hitting the home run.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm just going to get back to what I've been doing the last 11 years. Suddenly, he's got a day with 2 doubles, I think, in the same game and whatnot against the Tigers. And to me, that just screams like, where'd you get the idea that you just needed to hit a home run, bro?
Right.
And that makes me think, well, when you put the evidence together, if you and I have eyes and a brain and we can kind of figure out that, everyone's trying to hit a home run. So the messaging is, you got to hit that launch angle. You got to hit that uppercut swing. You got to, hammer it, that sort of thing. And you got to golf swing it. And that's the issue, is that's what looked way different last night. These guys weren't trying to hit everything out of the ballpark like they've been doing the last 3 weeks. And again, I still think that's a symptom of how they went off at the Rays ballpark, the temporary ballpark, because they were hitting a ton of home runs there. But at the same time, I think the reason they looked different last night is because they were actually fouling off close pitches. They were actually having an approach. They were going with the pitch. They were putting the ball in play. Somebody tweeted at us and said, do you think that Shonowell took that into his own hands with the bunt, or do you think that was a Wash call? And I don't know how to answer that, because unless Wash said as much, but the fact is, you saw the results by putting the ball in play. That bunt would have been an easy out if that third baseman tried to get it. But Mike, that's a thing that happens to Luis Rengifo over at third, right? That's what happens between Ohapi and Rengifo just last week, actually, I think, against the Mariners, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but still, that's something that happens to the Angels all the time. So for the Angels to take advantage of what happened right there is the result of putting stuff in play. So again, going back to this conversation of the veterans being their own hitting coaches, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in, who you have in charge as the coaches and telling them what to do. Just to go out there and say, the veterans got to be better. They got to ignore what's being told to them and just do what they always do. Right? Am I wrong?
That's really what that quote feels like, right? That's really what if you're gonna tease it out, that's what it feels like. Now, one of our everydayers commented yesterday, and I love this comment. They said, what if the philosophy is, when a runner gets to second or runner gets to third with less than 2 outs, you have to get him in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make contact. You got to adjust your swing. And I love that, because what it communicates is, do whatever is necessary so that that runner is finding himself in the dugout because you made contact. And John, that's really what it boils down to for this team. They just need to, if they're going to be their own hitting coach, they just need to make contact. We saw the Jays last night. They were choking up when they had 2 strikes because they were trying to make contact. And so maybe something gets stuck in the hitters' brains from last night's game that helps them to shift into this, hey, if I make contact, then perhaps it's actually going to be better for our team.
I'm going to do a shameless plug, and I cover MLB Game Night for Locked On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We talked about the Royals versus the White Sox on Monday night. Cole Reagans was back through 5 shutout innings, had like 12 Ks through 5 shutout innings. It was his first start since the 24th, Mike. And the Royals won 3-0. And if you go look at the scoring plays, it's like Michael Garcia singled to left. So-and-so scored. Michael Garcia bunted for an infield single, and so-and-so scored. They got 3 runs because they played small ball, and then they had tremendous pitching behind them. Yeah. And, other than the B team bullpen that we are concerned about, the Angels pretty much could do the very same thing, because again, they've had a lot of games where their starters, now it's probably 24 out of 30 something games that they've had starters give up 3 runs or less over their starts. And so if you just add on bit by bit, piece by piece, and do that philosophy of, hey, that runner at third, you're not leaving them there.
Yeah.
And you need to get them in.
Yeah.
If they followed that philosophy, we'd be talking about a much different team right now.
Yeah. Now, Wash did say that he thinks the players are doing the best that they can. Our coaches are working as hard as they can. And at some point, the players got to get it done between the lines. So it feels like a mixed message, doesn't it? It feels like, hey, here's what we're telling them. But, you kind of are your own hitting coach. So you kind of need to figure it out. But we're telling you really good things. So you need to put it into practice, right? It feels like a mixed message. And maybe that's why they're so confused at the plate. Now, Perry Manassian said he believes better days are ahead. He said the work's been good. The coaching's been good. It's just the execution. Baseball is hard. And you're going to go through times where you just don't play well. And it's one of those times that we're in right now. So for me, you really got to look for guys to step up. Now, John, we've seen Zach Neto step up, but here's how he's stepping up. When he gets on base, he's a threat. He's stealing bags.
Right.
He's running around. He's not looking at strike 3 down the middle.
He took that big walk before he stole second, and Nolan bunted him over to third and ended up scoring. Like, they were joking on the broadcast, oh, he's a guy who doesn't walk very often. And then they said, well, there's a first time for everything, right? Because he took that walk, Mike. That's what he needed to do in that situation to start out the inning with nobody on, nobody out. He gets on base, and then, kind of thinking, Nolan's grounded out a lot and hit into a double play or double play potential. So I'm going to go ahead and steal second. So that can't happen.
Yeah.
And then you see the results of Nolan putting the bunt down, that errant throw over to third. Well, I guess it wasn't an errant throw. It was an errant catch. And they score the tying run. And so again, he just did everything that he needed to do in that moment.
Yeah. Now we're going to talk about, a 2-strike approach that Wash brings up in our next segment. But John, I think the key to the Angels' resurgence offensively is that, one, they're going to make contact. But honestly, man, I think they just need to go buck wild on the bases. And even Kyron Paris getting caught stealing last night, I loved that because he beat it. He just came off the bag, right? And so I think that they just need to threaten, make that pitcher so uncomfortable. And the frustrating thing is they had Urena on the mound last night for the Blue Jays. He's not great.
No.
And they did everything that they were supposed to do against a pitcher that isn't great. I would love to see them do that against pitchers that are great. I know they're going to face Chris Bassett in this series. So they're going to have to get on base and run and run and run.
Yeah.
Let what it is that you do well help you to do well, right? Because they can steal bags. So it seems so simple from my perspective and your perspective. And perhaps last night was like a light bulb moment for the Angels coaches and the Angels players.
You can only hope, man, because we could be having a very different conversation after tonight's game where we're just as frustrated as we were, last week. And so this is what they did during the Tiger series. It felt like they did something that went, oh, hey, there's the team that they should be. And that was the game that they won. But then, we could have a night like this and they could revert right back. Like you said, they keep hitting the reset button and going back to factory settings, and we can't have that. So I hope that we see the same kind of approaches. We see guys fouling off close pitches. Again, umpires are bozos, but you know what? Every team in the league gets bad calls. And if it's close enough that it's a 50-50 chance of being the right or the wrong call, you got to foul it off. So shout out to them for doing that. Mike, I think the key to their resurgence is reading the room. And I think they read the room last night, especially in that moment with Neto taking the walk and stealing second. That's reading the room because, like I said, he needed to take the walk. He didn't need a base hit right there. Sean Noel comes up behind him. Could have been a double play potential. Steals second. Again, reading the room, knowing what happened earlier in the game and what's been happening with this team. Read the room, read the situation, and then do your best to execute. That's all that we can ask for.
Everydayers, get the supplies that you need from the site that's made for the skilled trades. That's supplyhouse.com. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order products online. They have an easy-to-use website packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. They have a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, so you're going to find exactly what you need. And if you need help, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. There's always someone to talk to, a real person, not AI, someone that can help you work out what it is that you need to work out. Plus, they got this free Trade Master program. It offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. And thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage of that. So now it's your turn. So join the free Trade Master program at supplyhouse.com/TM, and you can start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. And when you check out, use our promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
Mike, we've all talked about it. We've discussed it. We've waxed poetic about it. Too many strikeouts on this team.
Yep.
Now, Ron Washington said recently that he and the coaches continue to stress the importance of a 2-strike approach. They're encouraging hitters to cut down their swings in an effort to lower their strikeout rates. But according to Wash, several players have struggled to grasp the concept. Wash said, when you have guys who are capable of hitting the ball out of the park, it's hard to tell them to cut their swings down because they don't know what that is. So who do you think he's talking about here? I have my guesses, but what do you say?
I think he mentions two names later on, but I think he is addressing Jo Adell and Kyron Paris.
I was going to say the same
specifically,
ones. Yeah.
Right? And he does mention them later because those guys were raking in the minor leagues, and now they're up here. And he mentioned, when we talked about it in the first segment, he mentioned Jo Adell yesterday, and he said, Joe's taking a lot of pitches down the middle. He's guessing a lot. And I think that that's probably something that's true for a lot of these hitters, because if they're taking pitches down the middle, they're not anticipating, they're guessing. And Jorge Soler's strike 3 looking in that big inning, I think, was one major example of him guessing what the pitcher's going to throw him.
I would even put Taylor Ward in that category too. I know he didn't mention Taylor Ward, but the fact is that you've seen him have a really long swing chasing something down and away or down below the zone.
Yeah.
And that's not shortening up. That's not fouling off a close pitch. And so, I noticed last night he did have a slider in the zone, and usually he would lay off that because he's like, well, I'm a fastball hitter. But no, he fouled off a slider in the zone. And if he had been on it with good timing, it probably would have been crushed. Now, I think it was the same at bat that he did get the 2-run home run. But the fact of the matter is there's too much looking at stuff around the edges of the zone that they're not fighting off. But yeah, with a 2-strike approach, I agree. You got to shorten up. And that's been my contention with Nolan Shawnuel since before the season started.
Right.
Guy needs to shorten up his swing, because every time that he does, he puts the ball in the air and he hits it hard. Right now, he's hitting hard baseballs over to first base, and Vladdy Jr. scooping him right up. We saw that last night. He's hitting the ball hard. He's increased his bat speed, but it hasn't resulted in much more exit velocity than there was last year. Like every now and then there's one, but if he were to shorten up, and he's kind of one of the guys that does need to uppercut, right? Like pull the ball, dude. You got the short right field out there, and we've seen him do it before. And so if he would just shorten up, especially with 2 strikes, I think that he could do some damage.
Yeah. Now I agree with what Wash said next. He said sometimes you got to go a little off the plate to protect. We haven't seen the Angels do that, especially with them striking out a lot. And there are some stupid calls that are off the plate. So you do need to protect. He said, don't leave it up to the umpire. We say that every day, but when they go walk into that box, they have to make that decision. So he's communicating here that they're telling the players to do those things, which
finally
I appreciate. and if it is the players not putting it into practice, then I think that as a coach, as a manager, it's not just saying, hey, you got to have a 2-strike approach and you got to protect the plate. Then I would take it a step further and talk about choking up on the bat, shortening up your swing, shortening up your stride, right? We talked a lot about Neto's stride, Adell's stride last year. Haven't heard too much conversation about that this year, but I think what Wash is hitting on is great. Then he kind of gets into the old school traditional mentality. He says, the thing with this generation today is everybody's swinging on the same pitch. He throws a lot of like this generation comments out a lot. And I think sometimes that can, I don't want to say is offensive, but I do think that it feels like, okay, whatever, Wash, right? And so if they're approaching these young players and telling them, hey, you got to protect the plate, even if it's a little bit off, don't leave it to the ump. That's good.
Yeah.
But then if he adds on, and says, because these young guys get off my lawn, right?
Right.
That's where you're like, bro, you're going to lose a lot of players. Now, I know they should get over it. I know that they should be more mature than that. I get that. But the reality is that when you have a leader that tells you something great and then adds on to that something great with, like, I had to do it. I had to walk to school both ways up. It's like, shut up. Just tell me what you're hoping to get out of me, right? Instead of throwing it back to how great you were when you were a ball player, right?
Yeah.
I just want a manager. I want a coach that's going to give direction to this team. And I think what he said in that context, hey, you got to protect the plate, swing at pitches that are a little bit off. Don't leave it up to the umpire. I think that's enough. I think that's good, right?
Right. And he talks about Joe Adell and Kyron Paris saying, I don't know if they've ever had 2-strike approaches because, they just can't seem to be able to do it. It sounds simple, but to execute it, it's not very simple. But the thing I find hilarious is like, isn't this a conversation you should have been having before the season started, before, you went into a slump and you lost 7 in a row? And it's like, yeah, everybody should have a 2-strike approach, but what are you teaching these guys? You literally said, everybody's swinging the same way on every pitch. Right. That's the problem with the Angels right now. Ron, I don't know if you have MLB Network or you have time to watch other teams, but the fact is I'm watching, Padres, Yankees. I'm watching a couple of other games and I'm like, man, look at the way that they changed their Manny Machado, right? Yep. Like I watched that guy and I watched him take a ball the other way. I watched Xander Bogaerts do the same thing in that big inning against the Yankees the other night. And so I say all that because I don't think that that's true of everyone from this generation. I think it's true of everyone in the lineup for the Angels. And I don't think it's a coincidence, Mike, that you made the point of everybody looks like Soler, everybody looks like Ward, everybody looks like everybody looks the same in their swinging and their approaching. Then that's a you problem, not a player problem, right?
And one last thing. If the calls are a bit off the plate and you're saying don't leave it up to the umpire, I 100% agree with that. However, if the calls are off the plate, then your player needs their manager to get hot and start saying something to that umpire. I watched the Padres manager the other night.
Mike Schilt.
Go off, right? When Tatis got called out on strikes, then he gets tossed. John, they were down 3-0. They came back and won that game. I know it wasn't just about that moment.
It was in that inning. It was in that 8th inning.
Those players knew that their manager had their back and they were like, all right, I'm fired up. Let's go. Right. And they probably had extra energy. And that's the thing that Wash hasn't done. Cause I think it really boils down to an experience issue for our players. They're just young. Right. And they need their manager to have their back in those moments where they had a good eye and it was still called a strike.
Right. And, to add to what that happened there, and this is something Wash could take advantage of, Mike, Devin Williams was on the mound for a real long time while Mike Schilt was arguing. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I know he's been bad lately. And so maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but that was a long time to not throw a pitch and face the next batter. And so there's some 4-dimensional chess being played. And I'd love to see more of that from Ron Washington.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Johnny talked about it every game, every night, all season long. You can find Game Night on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, be sure you give us a follow at Locked On Angels on Twitter. Connect with Mike and I at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, find today's show, get in the comment section. We always do our best to get back to each and every comment. Hey, hit up the Super Halo Bros shop. Everybody's wanting that Sell the Team Artie shirt. You can find that in the episode description. There's a link right there. So grab yourself a shirt. Mike, what do we have on deck for Thursday's show?
All right, we know Trout is hurt, and we're hoping that it's just a small injury and that it's not going to be career-threatening like every one of his injuries the last 5 years have been. But he's been playing every game. So do they need to manage his playing time, or do they need to do something else? We're going to talk about the something else tomorrow on Locked On Angels.
All right, looking forward to that. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here, everybody, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.
That was a brilliant comment. Having the pitcher on the mound waste time because the manager. I love that. That was great. That's why you